What are we talking about today? We are talking about passwords. So I want to talk about passwords because they're one of the bigger security threats that we deal with in modern life. Passwords are increasingly numerous for a lot of us, and people fall back on reusing a lot of passwords, and especially risky is using very common passwords. So things like 1234 or password or test are very common passwords, and those 25 most common passwords make up 10% of all the passwords that are used online. This makes it really easy for hackers to break into people's accounts and access databases because a lot of times those passwords are then collected into these large tables called rainbow tables that hackers use to guess common passwords versus a lot of lists of emails they'll find online to try and compromise different people's accounts. And so that obviously is like a huge threat, and also passwords are just this super inconvenient thing. How much time have all of us lost going and having to reset passwords or trying to figure out what email account something is tied to, or recovering a password on an old account, or trying to cancel subscription on an account you don't have access to anymore. I mean, there's just so many different ways passwords can be inconvenient in our lives. And so while they tried to keep us secure at one point, I would argue they're not even really, they're kind of more trouble than they're worth at this point because they're not really giving us a whole lot of security. So we are going to be talking about passwordless systems like the Yubikey security keys, and specifically the Yubikey 5C NFC key that I have today. And so this is the Yubikey 5C NFC. It's a physical security key, and so you can plug this into a device where it has NFC, so you can tap to the back of a phone the way you would to get on like a metro, like the metro here in New York, or for Apple Pay is another example of a technology like that. So really, kind of ubiquitous technologies that are being used and give you access to all the benefits of a physical security key. This felt very odd to me as a solution to this problem at first, but then I've come to realize that it makes a ton of sense. We use keys to secure everything else in our lives. I use a key to secure my apartment. I can't lose my keys. I've got the AirTag on my keys because I can't lose them, because then I can't get into my apartment. So I'm not really worried about losing this thing either. And then I have a spare, just like I would have a spare key, so I can't be locked out forever from any of my accounts. But yeah, so from there, we're kind of, we're in a pretty good spot. Okay, so to explain why I chose the Yubikey 5C NFC as my security key, I want to talk a little bit about the different platforms that we use with it. So I use my iPhone and a Windows PC. So it's really important for me to have a platform agnostic key. So I like the USB-C model of these keys, because this also comes with NFC. So for most devices, I can use a USB port or USB-C port, which most devices have or most devices will have soon. And then even if Apple never gets around to putting a USB-C port in the phone, which I really hope they do, I can use the NFC on the back of the phone in order to authenticate into my accounts with a mobile device. Super handy, super useful. The main difference between this model, which goes for $55 MSRP, and the Yubikey Security Key C NFC, which goes for $29 MSRP, is this one supports a wider range of more like enterprise-grade authentication protocols. I don't fully understand all the technology. I'm not a security engineer. I just am interested in the field, and I want to try and work on my own personal security. But from what I understand, this key is a better insulation for me for the future because I am a software engineer, and I'm going to potentially have to be dealing with a wider range of different authentication protocols and different ways to get into those kinds of systems, especially with local development needs. You never know what you're going to need, so I kind of went ahead and bucked up a little bit to future-proof myself, so I just set this up once, hopefully I don't have to go back through this process again in a year or two. That said, so far the device has been really good. It's been really snappy to use with iPhone. I haven't had any major issues. One thing that can come up is sometimes when I'm logging into my Google account with it, I do have an issue where the phone will essentially just keep saying that there's no device found, or it won't even bring up the iPhone NFC reader screen. But usually if I restart the app, that gets working. It's a little frustrating, but it has worked better since I set it up in the first place. And as you authenticate into different devices, it is easier to go ahead and use that. I am going to have a follow-up video at some point about the Google Advanced Protection System, but just as a quick TLDR on that, that is an automatic feature that can be set up with Google that essentially prevents anyone from accessing your account without access to one of your physical security tokens attached to the account. You need 2 tokens attached to the account, so you have a main one and a backup. And that way you can protect your account. Even if somebody has access to your password, they still won't be able to get into your account unless they have access to one of your physical security tokens. So there will be a follow-up video on how that's set up, and to talk a little bit more about the advanced features tied in there, but just know that that's there. So outside of Google, this key is supported by a couple other major services. Off the top of my head, I do know that Dropbox and Microsoft even has full passwordless support currently for it. And then GitHub had support. There's several other major services that have support, and I will link down below the site. The Yubikey site has a great tool to see if your different services have support for it. Most of the different cloud development services also do, so like AWS and Azure have support for it as well. So that can be super useful if you're a developer and you want to add some more security to a small startup or a small shop. This could be a good option for you as well. So yeah, well, I'll attach that list. It does support most of the accounts I went looking for on it. There were a few that aren't out there. The one I do want to call out is Apple. Apple, you should be supporting third-party keys for your devices as well. It's ridiculous to just do it with your own. Open internet is a good idea. We should try to have open standards. It cuts back on e-waste, it cuts back on user experience and the drag in your user experience. But yeah, so to get away from Apple, the good news is it's been really easy to set up the device with all the services that support it so far. I haven't had any issues. I haven't been locked out of anything. No major things. One thing to call out, when I did attach to my Google account and I set up that advanced protection feature, which is optional, I did have to factory reset all of my Google Home devices in order to reconnect my account. There's no way to authenticate to them except for doing that. It was a little bit of an inconvenience, but honestly it was half an hour total of just kind of walking around and starting the resets and then setting them up on my phone. Not a huge hassle for the amount of security it adds to the account. So overall, really happy with the Yubikey. I'm going to do some follow-up content on this as it progresses and as more of the passwordless systems roll out this fall. I'm super interested to see what Apple does with the passkeys feature as well, so I'll be definitely talking about that. But hopefully you guys are interested in this. Hopefully this is something that you can learn more about. I'll be doing some follow-up videos on the setup. I have a video right now up in my short section about how to set it up on your Google account. So yeah, check those out. Keep an eye out here. There'll be more content coming forward in the future, and hopefully this saves you guys some time and helps you use technology to your advantage to get what you want to out of life. Thanks. Come back soon.